I think next year is going to be really interesting because even though there have definitely been lots of discussions about whether or not we're in a bubble right now, most of this year has kind of shown us like the demand is just red hot right now. And are we going to see any changes to that?
Hi there. I'm Wade Millward with CRN, coming at you with Dylan Martin, also from CRN. And today we're talking about what we're looking forward to in AI in 2026 as 2025 comes to a close. I cover Microsoft and IBM mostly for CRN, but been writing plenty about AI and cloud. AI usually from the application layer. Dylan, what do you do for CRN?
I cover mainly computer chips and semiconductors for CRN. I do a little bit of IoT, but mostly it's computer chips. So everything that's powering what you're writing about.
Yeah, so Dylan, I'll start with the general question of what you are looking forward to in terms of AI in 2026. What news will you be following?
Yeah. So, I mean, with computer chips and silicon, really a lot of it is so much about the AI chips that are powering these workloads. Mainly that has been GPUs from NVIDIA, along with the systems that those GPUs go in. And NVIDIA is increasingly making more and more of those systems. They have other components in there. So yeah, just kind of like, NVIDIA has just been so dominant. They said in the past couple months that they are expecting $500 billion in revenue from the beginning of this year to the end of next year from its Blackwell GPU platform and its Rubin GPU platform. And so that is, that's like $500 billion in span of like 2 years. And so is NVIDIA going to hit that number as they think they are? Clearly, they have a lot of visibility into that, working with a lot of different partners and customers. Will they go more than that? Then there's also just the competitive dynamic. NVIDIA is so dominant, but AMD has been making a lot of momentum right now, getting buy-in from OpenAI. OpenAI also got equity in AMD as part of their deal to buy AMD's Instinct GPUs, but still getting OpenAI's seal of approval is very meaningful. I believe that AMD is looking at tens of billions of dollars from its AI chips by 2027. Lisa Su, the CEO, said that she thinks that this OpenAI deal can basically just like open up a lot more revenue, like in the magnitudes, perhaps in the hundreds of billions. NVIDIA is still the ruler, and they probably still will be next year, but to what extent can AMD make inroads? Intel is still very much behind. They're still just trying to figure out if any of their products can stick. What are you thinking about for next year?
Yeah, to kind of continue down that path, I'm curious about what I've been just calling the cost of AI, and certainly as we see chip
Yeah.
innovation, I would imagine that maybe that would help in terms of the pricing, right, of AI. I still kind of hold on to this belief that we don't truly know the full cost of it, and I'm using cost pretty broadly here, right? I cover Microsoft a lot, so certainly there's the cost of $30 per user per month licenses. Now they've got a $21 package that is meant to be more enticing to SMBs and help
Hmm.
AI applications grow in use. Certainly, I mean that in the sense of, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but like the human cost, right? And for some that's a cost, that's a takeout cost. For others, it's a revenue generator, especially our audience. I kind of broadly am thinking about this cost of AI category. I appreciate that you talked about like the energy side of it. How further efficient can the infrastructure and these applications get? So that's something I'm
Yeah.
definitely looking forward to.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like so much of that cost is ultimately driven by the chip vendors and, NVIDIA, their most powerful GPUs take a lot of energy. They have argued that the magnitudes of performance improvements with the latest generations actually makes it a lot more efficient because you're able to pack a lot more compute into one server rack. But that server rack is requiring now lots and lots of energy. And I think there's definitely good questions being asked whether we have enough energy for all the data centers being planned, with OpenAI and Microsoft even. I think next year is going to be really interesting because even though there have definitely been lots of discussions about whether or not we're in a bubble right now, most of this year has kind of shown us like the demand is just red hot right now. And are we going to see any changes to that? So I think that's probably a kind of a bigger picture thing that we'll both be looking at.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Dylan, too. File this under cost of AI, but maybe I would call this a different item. That's sort of the business case for AI, especially for the MSPs and system integrators and folks that we focus on. So, we do have these license-based models, but consumption-based AI pricing models have emerged, and it's interesting to see all the different AI vendors experiment with what that might mean. Some folks like that kind of model. Some folks maybe don't like it from, reminds me of kind of the earlier days of cloud, where people were blowing past budgets. So hopefully, guardrails are improved both like within the tools, but also I'm sure that's something the MSPs we write about, something they've explored as a value add. I've heard talk about an outcome-based approach to AI projects, especially if people are kind of taken aback by some of the failure rate numbers that have been thrown out there for AI projects. I'll call this like the business case for AI, especially with our readers in the channel, who probably want to move beyond just consulting and getting data cleaned up. I think they are definitely interested in getting the stuff into production when possible.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of wrap things up, one other thing that I'm looking at, I think a lot of what we're talking about right now is like more data center focus, data center cloud. On the PC side, AI PCs, I think, are still a question in terms of when are they actually going to start making a bigger impact. We've seen more and more AI PCs being released over the last couple of years with greater and greater capabilities. But I just talked to an analyst at IDC, Lin Wang, and he's saying that, things are definitely not meeting expectations right now. For out of the total number of PCs being shipped, it seems like, the AI PCs are somewhat underperforming. And so there's definitely still a question of when are we going to start seeing a lot of traction around software that is enabled by the silicon for these AI PCs. I think AI PCs is definitely going to be an interesting space to watch. Also because of the memory shortages that I'll be reporting on soon, which are going to cause price increases for PCs, and it may cause OEMs to focus on lower cost models volume wise.
Well, I'm interested to see how the customers of our readers want to consume new AI innovations. Do they want, from the application side, standalone, Copilot or Chat GPT-esque applications, or do they want this stuff just embedded in the apps they already use?
Right.
I think, and not to get philosophical, but I think if it's just embedded in the apps we all use, I think it raises the question of how much of a revenue generator AI innovation is, or is this just going to be, the new way that we interact with our machines to kind of bring it back to endpoints. And certainly toward the end of this year, we've seen some interesting announcements on voice-enabled AI. I assume we'll see more in that world. What kind of capabilities, how much further along AI applications can go next year? Again, kind of people are looking for, can I use AI instead of hiring someone? Does this just increase productivity and change
Right.
these roles? Yeah, I'm really curious to see, how sci-fi can we get, and how much should we be realistic about what these tools can do?
Right. Because it's like, on one hand, you can see some companies saying, oh, we're laying off people because AI can do so many things. But then there's the flip side where companies may realize, oh, it's actually not doing everything I was hoping to do. And so it will be interesting to see, like, where do things fall like that on those matters next year.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of insight on how I think of it. I've been comparing, the calculator's kind of been my favorite analogy, and certainly when the calculator emerged, T1 tasks, just changed, right? But I don't know how many jobs are necessarily eliminated by a
Hmm.
calculator. And for our readers, what is a tier one, IT task? It's probably going to change. I don't know how drastically it'll change next year, but certainly 2 years, 3 years, it might look completely different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dylan, thank you so much for joining me. And for more on AI in the channel, visit crn.com.